In the middle of the 14th century, the world changed forever. It appeared without a warning, striking in silence, and in a matter of years, millions of people perished. Death moved faster than armies and reached farther than kings. What began as a rumor in distant lands became the terror of every village and city. People believed it was the end of days, that God had abandoned the world. The plague did not discriminate. Kings and lords died beside peasants and beggars. Monks and bishops fell as quickly as soldiers and merchants. Families vanished in the space of a single week. Whole generations were cut down without regard for power, wealth, or fate. To many who survived, it seemed as if the world itself had opened into an abyss, and all of humanity stood at its edge. Before we continue, if you want to see more videos about Armenian history, consider supporting the channel by liking and subscribing. To help with the production speed, I've started using AI images alongside real ones. You can also find all the sources linked in the description or in the comments. Now, let's get back to the story. The sickness began far away in the lands of Central Asia. It spread along with the great caravans of the Silk Road, moving with merchants, soldiers, and travelers. By the 1340s, it reached the Black Sea. In 1346, the city of Kaffa, a Genoese trading port in Crimea, became one of the first gateways of the plague into the wider world. Mongol forces laid siege to its walls, but their own camps were soon filled with the dying. An Italian notary, Gabriele de Musi, later wrote that Mongols hurled the bodies of their dead over the city walls in a desperate act of war. Panic filled the city. Whether this act truly spread the sickness or not, ships soon fled from Kaffa. On board, hidden in grain and fur, rats carried the plague to every shore they touched. By 1347, Constantinople was stricken. Pilgrims and traders carried the plague to Alexandria, Venice, and Marseille. By 1348, the sickness had swept through Florence, Paris, and Cairo. In Florence, half of the city died within a single year. In Cairo, whole neighborhoods were left empty, their doors sealed by the living. In Persia, travelers reported that villages had disappeared, leaving behind only ruined homes and overgrown fields. Chronicles in every land struggled to describe the sight of towns, where the bells no longer rang and the markets no longer opened. To many, it seemed not just a disaster, but a judgment. They saw in it the abyss, a darkness deeper than any war or famine before. By 1348, the plague reached the Caucasus. From the Black Sea, it pushed inland. From Anatolia, it moved east. From Persia, it crept north. There was no barrier to stop it. The Armenian Highlands, scarred by centuries of war and famine, lay directly in its path. Once great Bagratid dynasty was long destroyed. Ani, the jewel of the highlands, stood half ruined, a city of echoes rather than crowds. To the west, Kingdom of Kilikia struggled for survival, battered by Mamluk invasions and weakened by internal strife. In the highlands themselves, there was no king, no unifying banner, only local principalities and mountain malikdoms, each too small to resist the tide of death. Foreign powers closed in on every side. To the south lay Persia, which after the collapse of Ilkhanate in the 1300s splintered into rival dynasties and warlords. To the west, the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt pressed into Kilikia and Anatolia. To the north stood the Georgian kingdom, once mighty power but now divided and weakened. To the east, Armenia's borderlands faced the chaos left behind by the Mongols, where Turkic tribal confederations like Karakoyunlu began to rise. The highlands were hemmed in on all sides, fragile and exposed. Into this chaos came the Black Death. It did not strike walls or armies. It seeped into the villages, monasteries, and markets. There was no king to rally the people, no fortress high enough to keep it out. When it arrived, valleys fell silent, monasteries emptied, families disappeared within days. To the survivors, it felt as if the abyss itself had opened, and the world they had known had ended. Armenia's memory of the Black Death does not come from royal chronicles or from imperial histories. It survives in colophons. A colophon is a note written at the end of a manuscript, added by the scribe who copied it. Sometimes it is simple. The scribe gives his name, the place, and the date. Sometimes it contains a prayer for the scribe or for the Lord who commissioned the book. But in times of disaster, these notes became something more. They became witness accounts. Armenian scribes often used the space at the end of sacred books to write down what was happening around them. Famine, earthquakes, invasions, and plague. Unlike the formal histories written for kings and courts, these were personal. They are the voices of survivors, men writing by candlelight, recording what they saw and feared. It is from these colophons that we know how the Black Death struck Armenian Highlands. Without them, the story would be almost silent. In 1348, in the mountains of Syunik, a scribe named Nerses ended his manuscript with the words of terror. We witnessed the corpses of numerous men who died before our eyes, and I was distraught like a wild beast and could barely maintain my wits for the fear of death. Moreover, we too were afflicted by the plague, but through mercy of God I was spared. 2 years later, around 350, another scribe Vahan wrote about Armenian Highlands. 1/3 of the inhabitants of Armenia fell victim to famine, and after the famine was lifted, God's wrath again fell upon us, and there occurred a plague in all the land which took away half of the people. In Vayotzor, another scribe recorded villages left abandoned, fields untilled, and corpses laying unburied for lack of the living. In Artsakh, a monk named Vartan described the silence of his monastery, once filled with his brothers, now emptied. We wrote these lines in the days of death, when there were none left to bury the dead. And yet another colophon from the mid-14th century, an anonymous scribe confessed his despair. Who will remain to read these books? Who will remain to read these words when all around us the people are gone? These colophons were never meant as chronicles. They were side notes in sacred books, yet they hold the raw voices of survivors. To the scribes, the plague was not a distant horror. It was the silence after the church bells have stopped ringing. It was the smoke rising from empty homes. It was the fear that tomorrow no one would be left to write. They did not use flourish or ornament. Their words were blunt, stripped to the bone, and that is what makes them more powerful. They preserved the truth of a land struck by hunger and plague, not with grandeur, but with the plain voices of men who feared their world would vanish into silence. The same years were remembered far beyond Armenia. In Georgia, monks wrote of villages left empty and fields overgrown. In Persia, the historian Ibn al-Wardi describes whole towns erased, no village left untouched. In Byzantium, the scholar Nikephoros Gregoras told of Constantinople losing entire quarters in weeks, with houses sealed and carts of bodies passing through the streets. Even Italian merchants in Kaffa and Trebizond spoke of ports abandoned, ships adrift, and death carried inland on every caravan road. From Georgia to Persia, from Byzantium to the Black Sea, the words differ, but the picture is the same. Silence, abandonment, and the world undone. The Black Death did not vanish quickly. It returned in waves, striking Armenian populated lands for decades. Some outbreaks were brief and local, others spread across provinces, but each left its scars that lingered. Monasteries once alive with scholarship and art struggled to find new students. Families with ancient names disappeared. Entire villages passed into silence, remembered only in fragments of stone and fading script. And yet Armenia endured, not because of kings or armies, but because of people who refused to disappear. In the highlands of Syunik and Artsakh, the Melikdoms rose as guardians of the mountains. They sponsored scribes, rebuilt churches, and kept alive the fragile flame of learning. Beyond the highlands, in the growing diaspora, Armenians rebuilt in distant cities, from Lviv in the west to Isfahan in the east, carrying their faith, their language wherever they went. The memory of the plague never vanished. It lived on in prayers, in manuscripts, in the laments sung by survivors. But it did not define the Armenian people. What defined them was the survival. The Black Death did not break Armenia. It struck a land already wounded. Its kings dethroned, its cities fallen, and its people scattered. Yet it did not find people ready to vanish. Amid the silence of abandoned villages, candles still burned in the dark. Monks still bent over their pages. Mothers still sang the old songs. Stones were lifted again, not for graves but for churches. Armenians did not survive because they were spared. They survived because they chose to endure. Through plague, through invasion, through exile, they held to the faith, to the language, to the story of who they were. Empires rose and fell, borders shifted, but the people remained. Their survival was not fate. It was the unyielding choice to remain. This concludes today's video. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe. I'm Arminator, and I'll see you next time.